Welcome to our Sponsorships Duty webinar. I'm Imelda Reddington and I'm Head of the Immigration Practice at Field Seymour Parks. This is the second topic in our series of webinars where I and the team will cover important immigration topics for sponsors whilst providing some practical legal advice. My colleague Callum started off our series with an introduction to sponsorship, so if you haven't already watched the first topic, please go to our YouTube channel from our website. Just to recap, sponsorship registration is required for employers who want to recruit overseas workers in skilled roles or migrant workers from within the UK on another type of visa. I will be using terminology and acronyms from sponsorship law, so please do take a bit of time to review the content carefully. The Home Office place great trust in organisations who obtain registration and therefore enforce strict sponsorship duties to maintain immigration control. So what are my sponsor duties? I will now look at the 5 key areas of responsibility. Your duties as a licensed sponsor include complying with the immigration laws and sponsorship guidance, complying with wider UK law. There is a public test so that sponsors will not involve in certain behaviours that is not conducive to the public good. There are a number of record keeping duties and a number of reporting duties. I will cover these in a little bit more detail later. Organisations are also expected to comply with several overarching duties by preventing abuse of immigration laws and any sponsorship arrangements, by capturing early any patterns of migrant behaviour that may cause concern, by monitoring compliance with the immigration rules and law. They are also required to act honestly in any dealings with the Home Office, cooperate and meet any safeguarding requirements for children or vulnerable people that they sponsor. Failing to comply with your sponsor duties could result in actions from the Home Office, which could impact your ability to sponsor migrants. So let's look at when a sponsor's duties start and end. Looking now at the duration of sponsor duties. Your responsibilities as a sponsor will start on the day the Home Office grants the licence, and will continue until you surrender the licence, the Home Office make the licence dormant upon request, or the Home Office revoke your licence. Your responsibility for each worker you sponsor will start on the day you assign the Certificate of Sponsorship or the COS and will end when the migrant leaves the UK or their visa expires, or if their initial visa application is refused, if they move to a different sponsor, or if they've been granted settlement or move to another visa route which does not require sponsorship. Most of the changes I've discussed for the organisation and the worker will require a change of circumstances report on the sponsorship management system by a level 1 or level 2 user. So it's important that these changes are reported in accordance with the timescales, and I will look at that a little bit later in our reporting requirements. Let's take a look at the first of the 5 key areas of responsibility, which is complying with immigration law. Sponsors must always comply with immigration laws and all parts of the wide sponsorship guidance. They must only employ workers who are appropriately qualified, registered or experienced to do the job, or will by the time they begin. So for an example, if your worker is a doctor, you must make sure they have the correct registration that allows them to practice legally in the UK. You must keep a copy of any registration document, certificate or references obtained to confirm the worker meets the requirements of the job, and stop employing any workers who for any reason are no longer entitled to do their job. You must not assign a certificate of sponsorship where there is no genuine vacancy, and only assign a certificate to workers who you believe will meet the immigration requirements on the route you propose to sponsor them, and they are likely to comply with the conditions of their permission. You must disclose by adding a sponsor note if you assign a certificate of sponsorship to a family member of any within the sponsor organisation. And if applicable, you must understand the Academic Technology Approval Scheme requirement. This is where students have been provided with funding for their education. And the final point is about undertaking thorough checks on your key personnel. The Home Office will always make checks on key personnel and company house directors. Your key personnel must be a paid member of staff or engaged by you as an office holder. They must be based in the UK for the period they fill the role, not have any unspent criminal convictions or be disqualified from being a company director. And they cannot be a representative not in the UK or a contractor or a consultant. It's important that you keep your key personnel up to date at all time, but again, I will cover this a little bit later on in reporting duties. Now let's move on to the next of the 5 areas of responsibility, which is complying with wider UK law. Sponsors have a duty to comply with wider UK law, and this includes complying with UK employment law, for example, national minimum wage and paid holiday entitlement, complying with the legal working and right to rent legislation, holding suitable planning permission or local planning authority consent, or any legally required licence registration or approval to run the type of business at your trading address, where this is a requirement. If, for example, you are a food business, you must be registered with the appropriate relevant food authority. Similarly, if you are required to be registered or inspected or monitored by a statutory body to operate lawfully in the UK, for an example, a care or nursing home, a financial institution, you must ensure that these registrations are appropriate and up to date. As another example, it is now a requirement for care operators to be registered with the Care Quality Commission in order to sponsor migrant workers. You must only employ workers who have the appropriate disclosure and borrowing service checks where these are relevant or a mandatory requirement for the role. And if you are a sponsor who either employs or sponsors children, you must ensure that there are appropriate safeguarding checks in place. And finally, sponsors must not engage in any criminal activity. Now let's move on to our third area of responsibility. Our third area of responsibility is known as the public test. Sponsors have a responsibility to behave in a manner that is consistent with the Home Office fundamental values and is not detrimental to the wider public good. The Home Office will not licence organisations whose actions and behaviours are not conducive to the public good. Such actions and behaviours include, but are not limited to, fostering hatred or intercommunity division, inciting, justifying or glorifying terrorism, rejecting the rights of or discriminating against groups of individuals on the basis of their sex, age, disability, gender reassignment, sexual orientation, marital status, race, religion, etc. The Home Office may look into the public domain on your company website or reviewed feedback from third parties if they believe an organisation does not meet this test. So it is important that social media platforms, including your employee posts or publications, would not fall foul of this test. Now let's move on to our next area of responsibility. We will now look at the fourth area of responsibility, which is record keeping duties. Sponsors must retain evidence referred to in Appendix D. I set out a link on the slide. I don't propose to cover all of the information contained within that document, but I will look at some of the information where we have seen queries from the Home Office. So for your migrants, you must keep a current passport with the arrival date in the UK. If this is not stamped in the passport, we would recommend you ask for a copy of the boarding card and retain that on file. Sponsors must also keep a copy of the contract of employment, which must be signed by both parties, and have the information that is set out in the certificate of sponsorship, particularly the hours of work per week and the hourly rate of pay. You must also keep a history of all contact details. You must also keep pay and allowances. If there are any allowances reflected on the certificate of sponsorship, they must be the same in any other documents you have in relating to allowances paid. You must also keep records of any absences and holidays, which should be in line with your annual holiday entitlement policy. And also maintain the number of absences that are permitted annually, particularly under the skilled worker route. And finally, for migrant workers, if there are any changes in circumstances or duties that you needed to report in line with the reporting duties, which we'll cover later, you must also keep copies of the reports or screenshots of the reports from the portal. For the organisation, sponsors must keep copies of all documents that were submitted in support of the sponsor licence application, particularly where you provided certified copies and didn't need to provide an original. Any changes in circumstances for key personnel, you must take screenshots from the portal and retain these on file. And we're also seeing an increase in the types of documents we are being asked to provide to support in-year allocation requests or annual allocation of certificates. For example, if you have workers who are working under third-party contracts, we are being asked to provide copies of the third-party contracts, which are signed by both parties, and there are no restrictions on the hours of work or work provided. It is important to note that the Home Office can ask for any additional information to support a worker's visa or a new allocation of certificates. And since licenses no longer have an expiry date, we do expect to see more information requested throughout the life cycle of the license, particularly for these annual allocation requests. Now let's move on to our final. Now to look at our reporting duties. Sponsors must report certain changes that affect their sponsored workers and their organisation on the sponsorship management portal. Some changes also require the downloading of a submission sheet from the portal, which then must be signed and sent to the Home Office to approve the change. Now, specific changes must be reported within certain time limits, which are either 10 or 20 working days. Other changes, such as a breach of a worker's conditions or any criminal activity, should be reported as soon as possible. So looking first at the change of worker circumstances, normally these should be reported within 10 working days. If a worker doesn't start their role within 28 days, you can also add a sponsor note. If a worker is absent from work for more than 10 consecutive days, this must be reported. If a sponsored worker is absent from work without pay or on reduced pay for more than 4 weeks in total in any calendar year, this must also be reported. Where a sponsored worker's salary or pay is reduced from that what is reported on the certificate of sponsorship, again, this must be reported as a change. And any significant changes in the worker's employment, such as a change of role, core duties, a promotion, provided the change is within the same occupation code. If not, it may require a new visa. A sponsored worker's normal work location. This could also affect a company change of address and may require 2 reports. And finally, if you stop sponsoring a worker for any reason, it must be reported. This could also impact any refunds that may be due on the immigration skills charge. Now, looking at the organisation changes, if a sponsor makes any significant changes to the organisation, these must normally be reported within 20 days of becoming aware of the change. So you must tell the Home Office or report the changes via the sponsorship management system. If you don't have a level 1 user with access to the system, the change must be completed on a manual change of circumstance. So things like a change in registration of a governing body, if there's a merger, takeover or similar, or adding or removing a representative. So that concludes the 5 areas of responsibility. Let us now look at how we can assist you in maintaining compliance with your sponsorship duties. Looking first to how the Home Office can monitor compliance. They can look at information that's in the public domain. They can look at information on Companies House relating to your organisation. They can look at your company website. They can obtain information from third parties such as HMRC. They can review the information that you have reported on the Sponsorship Management Portal. They can review your employees' visa applications or their family members. They could receive a tip-off from a third party. They can attend your site or request a site visit, or they can ask for additional information from you, the sponsor. So how can we help you remain compliant with your sponsorship duties? Well, we offer a retainer service for sponsors for an annual fee. This service allows us to be nominated on your licence as key contact, legal representative, level 1 and or level 2 user. Part of this retainer, we undertake an annual health check, we submit an annual allocation request of certificates, and we provide checklists to support sponsorship duties. We also publish quarterly updates on sponsorship and important immigration topics. We will record key dates for renewal so that these key dates are not missed. We can also undertake a review of your licence or conduct a mock audit to ensure you are compliant with your duties, but normally this will attract a separate fee. So that concludes the topic of sponsorship duties. I know I've covered quite a bit in this webinar, so please do take some time to review the information. If you need assistance, please contact me on my email on the slide. We also share content on LinkedIn regularly, including a monthly immigration bulletin. So please do scan the QR code to connect with me. I will happily share information. One final point. For those of you who know immigration, you will be aware that immigration rules have changed quite frequently and will continue to change. We do expect to see more changes with the Labour government. Please do seek professional advice if you have any sponsor compliance issues, as these could affect your ability to sponsor workers or retain your licence. The information recorded in this webinar was accurate as of the 14th of August 2024. Thank you for your time.